is only one Earth and it needs to be protected. Now, that was the message from scientists, policymakers, and everyday people as the world marked Environment Day on Sunday. It also came with a warning that human-induced climate change, nature and biodiversity loss, and pollution and waste were pushing the planet to the breaking point. And that is why tonight we sit down to discuss the role we have in protecting our home. Joining me for that discussion to my immediate left is Jackson Kiplagat, Head of Conservation at WWF Kenya, and of course Nancy Githaiga, Country Director at African Wildlife Foundation. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I am Ashley Mazuri. Now, before we get to that conversation, I just want us to take a look at this story that the Woody Boras of Nairobi partnered with Kenya Wildlife Services to clean up the border of the Nairobi National Park from the Southern Bypass roadside. The governor of Nairobi, Anne Kananu, presided as chief guest of the event. Also present were Minister of Environment of the county government, Langata Seb County Administrator, and the Assistant District Commissioner. This was Sunday during Environment Day, and key issues were highlighted to the Nairobi governor that needed permanent and sustainable solutions, which the county would address, including raw sewage entering the Nairobi Park, contaminating the Hyena Dam through several points.
This day is World Environment Day. The theme of the day is Only One Earth. We are commemorating it in Nairobi National Park to show the significance of the day and the activities in which we have lined up for this day.
For message to Kenyans, I would recommend that when our leaders are speaking publicly, they advocate a lot of good that is geared towards making at least our world, our immediate environment, and our country a better place.
Today we decided to start with the Southern Bypass, which, as you can see, we've started the cleanup exercise, and I've seen so many challenges that are happening on this road, especially because of the way the road was made. It interfered with so many things like the sewer system, but I've called upon the Nairobi sewerage system to come and see how we can rectify the problem, because we can see the sewer is draining into the park, and we love our animals, we love nature, we want them to survive in a good and clean environment. Taka langu jukumu langu. Wherever you're working, wherever you're staying, make sure you're in charge of your environment.
All right, let's now start that conversation. Of course, let's start with the theme, Jackson. There is only one Earth, and it is ours to protect. No, it seems like such an easy thing to say, but it's not. Let's talk about the magnitude of this statement.
Thank you very much, Ashley. I think only one Earth is a very deep and important message coming again 50 years after it was initially conceptualized in the 1972.
Yeah.
This is actually an important message to each one of us, because we have only one Earth. There is nowhere else we can go. There is nowhere else we can be able to live in apart from this only one Earth. And I think it is a responsibility for each one of us to take care of it, to nurture it, and protect it from any damage.
All right, it is our responsibility, but it seems the crisis is accelerating. Why is that so, Nancy?
Thank you, Ashley. I'm just thinking, 50 years ago,
yeah,
we called it Only One Earth. I think that was the theme in 1972. It was 1973. 50 years, we are still saying Only One Earth. Have we made gains or have we made losses? I think the message is actually important, because instead of making progress, we have actually regressed. At that point, the challenges that were there, I'm sure, are much fewer than what we are currently dealing with.
Yeah.
So that time we didn't talk about issues of climate change and pollution to the levels which we see. That time our villages, and let's talk about Kenya, were cleaner than we have ever seen them before. River Nairobi and the river that we've just seen, the sewer going through the national park, I'm sure that was some clean river at some point. So that was 1972. 50 years down the line, we are still talking about this one Earth having, regressed and gone further than we were. So I think it is such a call for us as citizens of the world, as Kenyans ourselves, that it is not someone else's responsibility. It is your responsibility and mine. And the reason I'm saying this is oftentimes we look at environment as a public good. You know, it belongs to all of us. It's for everybody. And therefore, public good, I think we call it common. It's a common good.
Yeah.
And therefore, you can draw from it and you're not investing in it. And that's what we continuously are doing. That's why you and I can just get rid of your waste from your house and dump it outside your door. Why? Outside your door is common environment. Inside my house is my space. And I think that is why we are saying it is one earth. And as Jackson is saying, actually scientists are saying we are now spending almost 1.7 earths to maintain ourselves.
Yeah.
What that means is we are borrowing. So you are borrowing, you are taking more water than we need, we are taking more energy than we need, so we are spending 1.7 of an earth. So when that is gone, can we move to Mars or to Venus? I'm not sure.
Of course not.
Yes.
And it's interesting the fact that you've brought the 1.7 to maintain, you know, our earth as it is. Because in Stockholm, they did mention that we have to accept we're not doing enough to protect it. Do you think, not at a government level, not at a policy making level, at the common level, do you think we have accepted that we're not doing enough to protect it, Jackson?
I think as Nancy has already put it, we 50 years down the line since this same phrase was used in 1973, we've actually continued to use or misuse or abuse the environment that we actually survive on. And for sure, from a personal level, I think there are a number of things that each one of us can be able to do. It is to actualize what would otherwise be a public good to be personal good. We must look at common good for personal benefit. A very good example is the pollution that we are continuing to face across the country. Most of our rivers, most of our towns, for example, are facing challenges of pollution. We talk about the 3 planetary challenges. One of them is pollution, biodiversity loss, and climate change.
Yeah.
Pollution continues to be a big challenge because we have a problem of taking back what we release into the environment. And that is why this discussion about circularity is very critical. How do we take back and even make use of whatever waste in whatever form so that we are able to maintain what we call a circular economy? People talk about water changing in form and never going anywhere. I think we need to look at waste from that point of view, where we subject it to some form of circularity that can be able to allow us make use of waste and therefore reduce any impact into the environment.
How, for example?
A very good example is we have a challenge. When plastics were discovered early in the century, it was actually meant to reduce our impact or human impact on forests, for example. But as we speak today, plastics are becoming one of the world's biggest challenges because of its ability to degrade. It does not disappear from the environment so easily. So how do we deal with this? One is that possibly we need to reduce from source. We need to reduce continued production of plastics and possibly look at other innovative ways of still addressing human needs. Secondly, we need to take back the plastics that are out there and possibly use them to manufacture possibly other things that can be used longer.
Recycling.
We've seen, yes, recycling, reusing. We've seen other countries, for example, with the help of technology, manufacturing materials for construction of roads from plastics. That will keep that plastic there for a longer time than releasing it into the environment, which ends into the water systems, into the food systems in form of food, getting into the what we call the food chain, and then getting into humanity at the end of the day. So there are certain things we can do at a personal level with enabling conditions in form of policy. because there is a discussion currently around what is called extended producer responsibility. What is the responsibility of a producer of a particular product in taking it back to the environment? And I think this is a discussion we need to actualize at the soonest time possible.
All right, and I like the fact that you've mentioned a number of things: misuse and abuse, circularity process, and all of it. And Nancy, I want us to pick up from that, because you know we need to start restoring and the restoration process. But I guess most people are wondering, how do we go about it?
Yeah, probably, Ashley, it's, you know, the way we complicate it. You know, when you hear, for instance, we say 2020, 2030 is the decade of restoration.
Yeah.
UN decade of restoration. So as a Kenyan, what do I think? Oh, it's UN's responsibility to restore. It's the government's responsibility to restore. And then I do not see what my place is as a citizen, and I talk as a Kenyan citizen, to restore. We talked about, I think last time, we are talking about farming, and I'm glad, I think that is also one of the agenda of the main political parties that we have, that we are going to ensure that, you know, agriculture is upped, value chains and so on. But we haven't discussed at length where that agriculture is going to be done, and whether that is going to be part of the restoration, or are we going to open up newer areas because we've already degraded what we have. So when we are talking about restoration, then it has to start with me, where I work, my own piece of land, and I keep saying this, Kenyans, I think 60% of Kenyans are rural dwellers. So everybody has a space where you can plant your onion, or where you bury your garbage so it can become compost, or whatever else you can do. Yeah. And then the issue of, we've been talking about tree planting and tree growing. And I'm glad that Kenya now, I think we have reached 8.8% tree cover. Is it enough? It isn't, because we still need trees for our development. And therefore, when we talk about restoration, then we'll be talking about we need to restore, but we also need to produce for our own use. And the space to do this is in individual farms. I don't think government has learned, you know, to plant trees and use them for paper production or for timber. That can only be found in individual people's farms if we are going to sustain, you know, that coverage.
But even if we talk about planting trees, how many plant and leave them?
How many grow? Actually, the question is more, you know, we plant and we love the exercise. We shall say 10,000 trees were planted.
And
I don't
take
know how many.
pictures all over.
I think Kiplagat was planting some on 5th. But we would want to know, after planting trees on 5th, a year down the line, how many survived? Have we gone back? Because it's not just about, you know, planting a tree. It's more about growing a tree. Now, we say we shall plant in schools, and we keep saying, you know, each child should adopt a tree, and I think it's excellent. Or each person should plant trees their age. If we did that, I think we might hit the 20% if every Kenyan, you know, planted their age. But planting is different from, you know, ensuring that these trees grow. And the more reason why I'm saying where we have this space is in individual private lands. Government will plant, will do a lot and invest in that. But if Nancy plants trees in her land, I will ensure they grow, because I have actually invested in that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that is where we need to keep pushing. Let me grow trees for my own wood fuel. Let me grow trees that for my, you know, for taking care of my soil cover, even as government is doing that and restoring the government forest. So my own personal space is that. My own personal space is ensuring we reduce soil erosion. My own personal space is ensuring that we use water that is on our space, you know, properly. Okay, and it's a good thing when you talk about tree cover and forest cover. There's that goal, 30 by 2030. How achievable is this goal, or is it just a goal like any other, Jackson?
Yeah, the 30 by 30, that is achieving 30% of our land and, you know, good status for biodiversity conservation by 2030. Is an ambitious goal. It is a good goal because it helps revamp the international and local efforts towards actualizing the ambition to restore or to bring back at least what we had. If you look at a country like Kenya, for example, 8% of our land is under what we call protected areas by government, either national reserves, parks, and other gazetted protected areas. But outside these areas in the last few years, like 5-6 years, there's been a tremendous investment by communities to the extent that now we've increased protected areas by communities by about 22% in form of community conservancies. We, of course, globally as a community, the intention to ensure that we have 30% of a country like Kenya that has about 583 kilometers square under biodiversity conservation, or rather under what we call a protected form of secured area of biodiversity conservation is critical in ensuring that we continue benefiting from the goods and services that nature provides. Imagine, actually, a situation where we have Masai Mara without the Mara River. Imagine having the flower sector, which earns the country huge amounts of foreign exchange.
Yeah.
Imagine that floriculture sector without Lake Naivasha. Imagine the vegetable growing that feeds the country and beyond, that relies largely on water. And that is why, in essence, we have to restore some of these water sources so that we can be able to enjoy or continue enjoying the benefits of biodiversity. And actually, that's the essence of sustainable development. The concept of sustainable development is to be able to ensure that those of us who are here today are actually benefiting, and at the same time ensuring that those who are coming thereafter can be able to benefit from the same resources that we are benefiting. We actually told, a number of reports tell us already that since the 70s to date, we've lost a significant number of species, like the Living Planet report that is published by WWF indicates that we've lost close to 70% of wildlife populations from the 1970s to date. And it is basically largely driven by human action. And I think Nancy mentioned earlier about expansion of agricultural production areas.
Yeah.
This is one of the largest threat, and that is why using some of this land in a sustainable way, so that we can continue making use of that land that we have instead of expanding more into the wild areas is important.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Nancy, all this requires discipline. And you mentioned earlier that Kenyans suffer from poverty of the mind. So then how do we ensure, how do we become that focused and disciplined nation when it comes to attaining these goals?
Let me go back a little bit, Ashley.
Okay.
Do we have a choice? About restoring 30%. I don't think Kenyans have a choice. I do not think as citizens we have a choice. Look at this. We are now at 50 million. The amount of water in this country will remain the same. We say it's finite. And I think from the hydrological cycle we did in science, so what we get is what goes to the ocean and comes. So we are not expecting to get water from anywhere else. The amount we have is what we have. For 50 million, for 100 million Kenyans. The air we have is the air we have. For 50 million, for 100 million. The charcoal we are using, the wood, the energy we are using, if it's not enough for us now at 50 million, what will happen when we are at 100 million? And I do ask this question. We are yet to substitute water. If we start drinking oil or we start drinking sand, then we can say, we can live the way we want.
Yeah.
But if we still intend to drink water, as citizens, as the current generation, if the future generation is expected to drink water and not oil, we have no choice.
Water is life.
Water is life. Yeah. So we must, in fact, 30% may not be enough. We are saying we shall be urbanized, so we'll have more Kenyans living in urban areas, requiring the ecosystem services that Jackson is talking about, requiring clean air, requiring clean water. And if then the cost of this goes up, Kenyans, we are now complaining about oil. We can boil food and do boil or some, tumbukiza. You don't need oil in your house. But when we don't have water, then the equation will change. So I think that is why all of us, as we are talking about citizens, It is not the role of someone else. It is not the role of organizations. It is not the role of UN. It is actually my role and yours, to ensure that either I am doing my bit or I am demanding that my leader that I am going to elect on 9th of August, heeds to these demands.
And it's a good thing you've mentioned, the political landscape that we're in right now. And Kenyans are going to go to the ballot, as we're all aware. Yesterday, Azimio did launch its manifesto, and we did see a few things on issues to do with the environment in general. But as they say, the devil is in the details. Do we really know how it's going to be implemented? Those questions are still there. So even as we try break this cycle that we're in, because it seems to be an endless cycle, for me is as we wait for the governance perspective, because even governing, having that strong governance over environmental issues is still a challenge. What can you and I do, Jackson?
Thank you. Ashley, I want to take you back a little bit and say that we are in a political season now.
Yeah.
And all political parties and stakeholders are discussing their manifestos. And they are actually exuding a lot of confidence in how they would want to transform things, economy being one. Kenya as a country, its economy is actually 42% dependent on natural resources. The tourism sector, the agriculture sector, which I mentioned earlier, are critical for that, not to name a long list of the same. I think it would be important for political parties and the coalitions to actually start from there. If we actually need to transform the economies, then we need to look at the bedrock of the sectors that we are discussing. And the environment sector is one critical. And I would want to challenge them to actually consider having environment as the first one and then followed by the others, because that is actually the bedrock. And I think it would be critical for them to look at even the commitments that we've made internationally, but even more within our constitution. Chapter 5 of our constitution on land and environment grants responsibilities and obligations to the government and citizens. And I think that is what you asked. What is it that we can do as citizens of this country? I think one, from a start, it is possible to actually ensure that our leadership from local to national level provide policies that provide enabling conditions for us to be able to have a good environment. One is we have to enforce whatever legislation that we have to ensure that each one of us is compliant. Two, provide incentives. These enabling conditions must provide incentives for each one of us to participate in actualizing this ambition. But thirdly, at an individual level, we have only one earth. And it is this earth that is actually serving us with the goods and services. And I think when we take that responsibility at the individual level, then I think we can be able to contribute and make a difference for the better.
All right, I want us to just briefly talk about the international scene. Sweden just the other day made a pledge to get rid of coal and fossil fuel. And I want us to go back all the way to COP26. A number of pledges were made. Cut emissions until they reach net zero by mid-century. How possible is this? Not just as at a Kenyan level, but at a global level, because it has a trickle-down effect, Nancy.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I think the commitments are good, and I love the commitments, because then we can ask that commitments are actualized. If there's no commitment, we cannot hold anyone accountable. And I think actually Sweden in Stockholm, they led by example, like, saying no more fossil fuels and coal, no more new licenses for that. We are talking of a globe that, already is advanced. We are talking about electric cars, for instance, already existing in the market. So it means it's possible to reduce, our dependence on fossil fuels if there is commitment. So already, if they are electric cars, and Jackson has talked about an enabling environment, why wouldn't our government, for instance, make it easier to buy an electric car compared to a fossil fuel car?
Can we afford it?
We can. I mean, they are being afforded, and I think even if the cost may be higher, And it's not, so much higher than what a fossil car would cost. But if there is that enabling environment, then it would encourage me then to use an electric car. It would encourage Jackson to stop using his 4-wheel drive Guzzler, because we are also doing a lot of that in a city like Nairobi where the roads are good.
Yeah.
So using more fuel than you'd actually need when you can move along. The commitment would be, our government committing on public transportation. That is what actualizing that global commitment would look like. It is not rocket science. So if other countries are doing it, are we putting resources where they are supposed to be? And I think going back to what you've talked about, the commitments, like the manifestos, and we hope that we are going to see more of this, where we are saying, we have a 10-point agenda on what we need to offer Kenyans. So just like Kiplagat is saying, environment is the bedrock. We always say you cannot do business on a dead planet.
Yeah.
We say dead people don't need jobs. And if the biodiversity is shaken, if the earth, the only earth that we have is shaken, then we cannot actually advance on that earth. So I say there is that responsibility, and the commitments are major. And if these governments are willing to put in resources, which we hope we shall see as we also proceed to, COP27, what we are calling the African COP, that we, let it not be so lofty, because when it looks lofty, we need billions of money, then it makes it impossible.
Okay.
But when we are saying that, okay, these are the commitments. So if we have no fossil fuel, can we have the technological transfer for electric cars for developing nations or, middle income countries?
All right.
I think that is the kind of commitment that we are talking about. But going back to, the poverty of the mind, we can talk about what the globe can do and what COP is going to talk about in 27. But as long as I drive my car and throw my garbage out of my car, rolled down, then that is what I'm calling poverty of the mind of myself and any other person that is doing that.
Okay.
So it's your responsibility and mine.
All right. Thank you, Nancy. We want to take a short break. Of course, you're watching Front Row. When we come back, we'll continue with the conversation and, of course, talk about how best we can strengthen environmental governance. Keep it Front Row.